I spent my formative years in a small town in Texas, a community characterized by the saying, "Everyone knows everyone." This adage encapsulated the intimate and interconnected nature of our town, where familiarity was the norm and relationships were often deeply rooted. My father served as a translator at the U.S. Embassy, which meant my upbringing was enriched by a plethora of stories that spanned different cultures and languages. His job provided me with a unique lens through which to view the world, fostering a sense of curiosity about international affairs and diverse perspectives. Upon reaching the age of 18, my family relocated to England, prompted by my father's career. This transition marked a significant turning point in my life, as it offered me the opportunity to attend college at the prestigious institution of Oxford University. During my time at Oxford, I fully engaged with the academic environment, immersing myself in studies related to computer technology, business management, and economics. The rigor of the curriculum challenged me in ways I had not anticipated, yet I thrived, cultivating a deep understanding of these subjects while also fostering lifelong friendships. My connection with my sister, Patricia, affectionately referred to as Pat, grew stronger during this period, as we shared experiences and confided in one another, strengthening the bond between us. After completing my studies, I returned to the United States, eager to carve out my own path and contribute meaningfully to my field. My name is Dan Colton, and before exploring the complexities of my journey, it is paramount to introduce an important figure from my past, my ex-wife, Emily. Physical fitness has always been a priority for me. I maintain my health by jogging 2 laps around the park each morning when time permits. Standing at 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighing 180 pounds, I am committed to staying fit through a regimen that includes swimming several miles weekly, as well as attending an old-school gym twice a week for weightlifting and mixed martial arts training. While I do not consider myself a martial arts expert, I possess enough skill to hold my own in various situations, which is reflected in my muscular physique. Despite holding multiple degrees, including a master's in computer technology, a postgraduate qualification in business management, and a bachelor's degree in economics from Oxford, I often receive comments about my physical resemblance to George Clooney. This connection to my father's career as a translator not only shaped my worldview but also allowed me to complete my studies in England while he returned to the US to work as a computer repair specialist after his service. Currently, I have taken on the role of managing a well-regarded company, where I oversee the development of a new program designed for a range of applications, from gaming to military utilization. The program's capability to address issues in real time is of paramount importance, and I anticipate its readiness within 6 months to a year. My relationship with my sister Patricia is one of immense significance. She is 2 years my junior and currently serves as a junior partner at a respected law firm in New York City. We share an unbreakable bond, confiding in one another and maintaining complete transparency, with no secrets between us. Emily, my ex-wife, also prioritizes fitness and is known to visit the gym at least 4 times each week. Standing at 5 feet 3 inches, she possesses a striking figure characterized by her measurements of 34-24-33, complemented by her vibrant red hair and captivating green eyes that reflect her spirited personality. Her angelic face and radiant smile have a unique ability to illuminate any room she enters. After earning her law degree, she secured a position as a corporate attorney at XYZ, a public relations and advertising firm. Our paths first crossed at Patricia's graduation celebration, where Emily was introduced to me by her sister and our mutual friend, Amy. Coincidentally, we lived just 3 miles apart in the mid-sized town of Freestone, Texas. Our romantic relationship blossomed approximately 6 months later, culminating in marriage just 6 months after we began dating. Following our wedding, Emily began her tenure at XYZ as a junior attorney, initially earning a modest salary enhanced by bonuses. Meanwhile, I was employed at ABC Flight Controllers, where my responsibilities included assembling and analyzing software code, earning a decent mid-5-figure salary along with bonuses. The 3-bedroom home I inherited from my grandparents was situated in a pleasant neighborhood, and my sister received a lump sum inheritance which provided her with financial stability. Meanwhile, Emily's family remained in New York, and my parents had retired to Florida. Each year, we hosted family gatherings during Thanksgiving and Christmas at various venues, enjoying a comfortable lifestyle characterized by modest income, nice vehicles, and 2 vacations annually. However, after 2 years of marriage, Emily received a promotion to junior partner, and I began to notice subtle shifts in her behavior. With her new position came an increase in her social outings with friends on Friday nights, occurring several times a month, as well as a tendency to work late more frequently than before. Naturally, these changes sparked feelings of suspicion within me, leading me to revert to actions that I knew were not entirely rational. I found myself checking her emails, examining her personal belongings, and even installing a keylogger on her laptop. Although I recognized my paranoia, I also felt that my concerns were not entirely unfounded. Driven by these suspicions, I followed her one evening, yet witnessed nothing inappropriate. She refrained from dancing with other men, leaving me puzzled about the undercurrents in our marriage. Emily expressed a desire to achieve the status of senior partner before starting a family, a timeline she estimated would require an additional 5 years. While she found satisfaction and purpose in her career, I grappled with feelings of stagnation in my own position, which seemed devoid of opportunities for advancement, being in a family-owned business. The family-owned nature of my previous employment often led to promotions being awarded to relatives, regardless of their qualifications or suitability for the positions. This environment of nepotism ultimately prompted me to establish my own computer repair business. However, I envisioned a different model than the traditional storefront where clients would bring their laptops for servicing. Instead, I decided to focus on providing specialized services for businesses that required enhanced security systems and upgrades to their existing setups. Before immersing myself fully into this venture, I conducted a thorough business analysis and anticipated a gradual growth trajectory during the initial stages. Nevertheless, I projected that within a year, my earnings would surpass those from my previous job, which had stagnated my career aspirations. To ensure transparency with my partner, Emily, I sat down to explain my plans. I conveyed that the first year might be challenging, yet I was optimistic that our long-term financial situation would improve significantly. I chose not to disclose my development of new software at this stage to avoid complicating the discussion. Emily expressed strong opposition to my decision, questioning the rationale behind risking our financial stability when we were relatively comfortable. Although she was flourishing in her professional life, I felt trapped in my unfulfilling role. Throughout our relationship, we had meticulously maintained separate finances except for a joint account dedicated to household expenses. We each made equitable contributions to our monthly bills and allocated the remainder of our incomes to personal savings. In pursuit of my entrepreneurial goal, I made the decision to leave my job and invest my savings, along with a loan secured against my house, to launch my venture. I commenced advertising my services and engaged in outreach efforts from a modest workshop that I had rented, which included a small office space. Within 3 months, I reached a break-even point, which was a promising indication of the business's viability. Simultaneously, I was pleased with the progress of the new software I was developing. However, one evening, I was confronted with unexpected and shocking news. Emily revealed that she was 3 months pregnant with twins. This revelation incited a wave of paranoia within me, prompting a thorough review of her activities over the previous weeks. I discovered that she had been in Miami for a business trip, and doubts began to cloud my mind regarding her fidelity. I decided to pursue a DNA test, driven by the overwhelming suspicion that the children may not be mine. Ever since she learned about the pregnancy, Emily had distanced herself emotionally from me, ceasing affectionate gestures. She insisted on abstaining from intimate relations, citing concerns for the health of the babies, despite reassurances from both myself and her doctor. Despite the strain in our relationship, I endeavored to provide support during her pregnancy. I accompanied her to relaxation classes, offered nightly foot massages, applied oil to her growing abdomen to mitigate stretch marks, and tolerated her fluctuating moods. On the business front, my company continued to expand, leading me to hire a new computer technician, Greg, and appoint May as our receptionist. Emily showed little interest in the progress of my business, so I refrained from discussing it with her, focusing instead on building my entrepreneurial venture. The day of Emily's labor arrived while I was engaged in a meeting with a client regarding a server upgrade. I received a call notifying me of her condition, and my client congratulated me before urging me to leave. Emily was already at the hospital, and I quickly collected her go-bag and the DNA test kit before heading to her side. Upon arrival, I learned that she had been admitted to a private room in the prenatal ward. After a medical examination, the doctor informed me that it would still be some time before the delivery, despite my own growing anxieties about the paternity of the twins. Nevertheless, the prospect of fatherhood filled me with excitement. The doctor suggested I return home for a while, promising to notify me when the delivery was imminent. I complied, returning home to eat and eventually drifting off to sleep. My rest was interrupted by a phone call. Emily was fully dilated and experiencing contractions every 7 minutes. The babies were on the verge of entering the world. Rushing to the hospital, I pondered why births often occur at such odd hours. I arrived just in time to witness the delivery of our first child, followed shortly by the second. As the nurse tended to the newborns, counting fingers and toes, and ensuring their well-being, I took the opportunity to discreetly collect swabs for the DNA test, driven by my need for certainty regarding their lineage. Emily, despite her own challenges, looked at me with tearful eyes and expressed her love, which I reciprocated with a gentle kiss. Following the delivery, Emily was moved to the recovery unit to rest, and the medical staff advised me to return home for the evening. The next day, I eagerly reached out to family members to share the joyful news. The grandparents expressed their excitement and anticipation to meet their new grandchildren, with Pat and Amy promising to arrange time off to visit. During my visit to the hospital to bring flowers for Emily, I also delivered the DNA kit, where I was informed that the results would be available in approximately 10 days. The doctor further explained that Emily had sustained significant tears during the delivery that required time to heal, indicating that her recovery would necessitate patience and care. The severity of her tears indicated a deep emotional turmoil that necessitated an extended period of healing, prompting a daily commitment from me to visit her at the hospital over the course of 5 days. Each time I arrived, however, I was met with a sense of distance. She appeared withdrawn and quiet, a stark contrast to the vibrant woman I had known. Concerned for her well-being, I inquired with the doctor about her unusual demeanor. His response was somewhat dismissive, reassuring me that this sort of emotional response was not uncommon. He mentioned that she would be discharged from the hospital that Saturday afternoon, a detail I clung to with anticipation. Friday came, and with it, a countdown began that saw me eagerly awaiting the moment I could finally bring my family home. I had meticulously prepared the nursery in advance, ensuring it was a safe and welcoming space for our new additions. On Saturday morning, I took every precaution, double-checking that all safety cuts were securely fastened. At 1:30 p.m., I set out for the hospital, my mind filled with thoughts of reuniting with my wife and children. Upon my arrival, I made my way directly to her room, only to discover it was empty. Panic surged through me as I frantically asked the nearest nurse for information on where my wife and kids were. Her reply was staggering: another man had already taken them. Confusion and dread washed over me as I demanded to know who this man was. As my anxiety grew, I attempted to call Emily's cell phone, but there was no answer. The situation quickly escalated, drawing the attention of the senior nurse who arrived to manage the unfolding crisis. She reported the incident to security, who subsequently contacted the police. When the officers arrived, they were led to the security room to review the footage from that morning. Upon their return, the male and female detectives delivered news that shattered my reality. It seemed Emily had left the hospital willingly with this man. They informed me that they knew his identity but could not disclose it. Stunned, I felt my world tilt as I asked them what I was supposed to do. Their advised response was both infuriating and hollow. I was to go home and await further communication from them. Left alone with my spiraling thoughts, I sat in a daze, enveloped by a sense of hopelessness. The weight of the situation pressed down on me, and I felt sick, overwhelmed by the realization that I had hit rock bottom. Tears streamed down my face as I succumbed to the emotional devastation. The following morning, Sunday, I awoke from a troubled sleep, my eyes swollen from crying. I managed to shower and dress in clothes that felt more appropriate for the occasion, though I moved through the motions on autopilot. Breakfast was a mundane affair, but after eating, I began to feel a slight lift in my spirits and thought perhaps Emily's parents might have some information. I dialed her father's number with urgency. He answered, but before he could fully respond, I cut him off, demanding he contact Emily and find out what was happening. Frustration bubbled within me as I struggled to comprehend why she would act in such a manner. By lunchtime, seeking comfort in food, I made my way to Denny's and ordered an unhealthy meal, a mega burger topped with fries, onion rings, and a beer. After the meal, I returned home, but the silence was deafening. I checked the answering machine, hoping for any sign of communication, but found none. Turning on the television, I attempted to distract myself, yet my mind kept replaying the disheartening events of the past few days. Defeated, I eventually gave in to fatigue, heading to bed past midnight, but sleep eluded me as my thoughts continued to spiral. Around 6 a.m. the next morning, I forced myself out of bed and resumed my routine, taking a shower before heading downstairs for breakfast. As I sat staring at the news, the phone rang, jolting me out of my daze. It was Emily's attorney, asking if we could meet later that day. A flicker of hope ignited within me as I agreed to a meeting time of 2 p.m., eager for answers. Arriving at the attorney's office, I was ushered in promptly, and to my surprise, I found not only the lawyer waiting but also Jimmy Prescott, Emily's boss, seated on the sofa. The atmosphere was thick with tension as I chose to remain silent, absorbing the gravity of the situation. The attorney finally broke the silence, stating that we were gathered to discuss the terms of my divorce from Mrs. Emily Colton. He elaborated on a brief proposal presented by Emily and Mr. Prescott. She would file for divorce on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. In what felt like a cruel twist of fate, the proposal asserted that I would retain all assets, including my business, property, and retirement savings, while she would secure similar benefits. However, the most devastating condition was that I would need to sign documents permitting Mr. Prescott to adopt our children. The implications of that ultimatum crashed down upon me, leaving me stunned and grappling with disbelief. In exchange for his cooperation, Mr. Prescott has offered to deposit a substantial sum of $2 million into an account of your choosing. The moment those words left his lips, a surge of adrenaline coursed through my body. I sprang to my feet with such urgency that I nearly overturned the desk in front of me. "Absolutely not!" I exclaimed, my voice reverberating in the room. "My children are not for sale at any price. You can have that woman, that strumpet, for nothing. I want nothing to do with her. So, get lost." Emily, seated nearby, rose from her chair and attempted to interject with a softness in her voice, perhaps hoping to placate the rising tide of my fury. "Dan, I know I hurt you, and I am truly sorry. I never intended for it to come to this point. Jimmy and I have been involved for some time now, and we genuinely want to get married. He is eager to adopt the kids because, regrettably, he cannot have children of his own." I interrupted her sharply, disbelief and resentment flooding my senses. "Oh, so the children would be guaranteed everything, right? A grand house, top-notch schools, the ideal life." My sarcasm dripped with disdain as I continued to lash out. "And what do I have to offer them? An old, dilapidated house and a small computer repair business. Is that why you want to leave me? Because I lack ambition, wealth, and the ability to provide a better future for our children?" Her demeanor hardened as she responded, her tone now icy and resolute. "If you refuse to sign these papers, I will take you to the cleaners. I will claim your house, half of your income, half of your savings, your retirement funds, and your business. I will ensure that you never see your children again. You are in a no-win situation, Dan. Our way, at least, you get something in return." Rage consumed me as I shot back, "Go to hell, Emily. You have no legal claim to the house, it is mine. Half of nothing is still nothing. I do not have savings, and your income exceeds mine, so support payments will be minimal at best. I will see my children every other weekend and pay child support with no objections. As for my business, it does not exist without me. And your threats? I welcome your challenge, I will see you in court." With those defiant words, I turned on my heel and stormed out, leaving behind 3 astonished faces. After my departure, I felt a sense of disorientation and anger but made my way to Denny's for a meal. Following dinner, I returned to an empty house, a cold silence greeting me. I sat there, a beer in hand, staring vacantly at the television, consumed by fury against myself for failing to check the peephole before opening my door. Suddenly, I was jolted awake from my stupor by a loud knock at the door around 11 o'clock. Groggy and somewhat disoriented, I opened the door and was met by a sudden onslaught. The door was violently thrust open, sending me staggering back, though I managed to regain my footing. 3 men surged into the room, intent on grabbing me. Instinct kicked in, and I struck the first assailant in the throat with my knuckles extended, momentarily incapacitating him. The second attacker attempted to grapple me into a headlock, forcing me toward the ground. While I struggled against him, the third man swung a baseball bat, striking my shin and causing me to collapse. As consciousness began to slip away, I noticed the first man still laying on the ground, choking from my blow. The other 2, thinking they had me finished, began to kick me, assuming they had secured their victory. They needed to leave enough evidence behind, of course, for the police to investigate. Just as I felt myself fading out, their leader hoisted me up to my feet, his face mere inches from mine. "Now be a good boy and sign the papers, or we will be back," he threatened ominously. In a moment of desperation and clarity, I headbutted him squarely in the nose, feeling the warm blood splatter across my face, evidence that would be critical. Quickly, I pulled a handkerchief from my pocket and dabbed some of his blood onto it, knowing it was vital for my own defense. The man's reaction was swift. He turned away, clutching his face and cursing me. I could feel myself slipping into blackness again, only to be jolted awake when he delivered a vicious kick to my ribs, causing me to faint and collapse against the wall. When I regained consciousness, disorientation clouded my mind. Voices echoed around me, but I could not discern their owners. Vague shapes moved in and out of my line of sight, but recognition eluded me until darkness enveloped me once more. The next time I awakened, bright sunlight flooded the room, and my surroundings slowly became clearer. I turned my head to see a woman seated in a chair, and it took a moment for me to recognize her as Cam, the wife of my MMA instructor, Nick Wright. My mouth felt parched, and I struggled to muster my voice, managing only a low, unintelligible sound. Cam approached and pressed the call button with one hand while holding mine with her other. A nurse soon entered, checking my vitals and offering a warm smile. "How are you feeling?" she inquired gently. The ice chip she provided was a revelation, tasting far more exquisite than the finest scotch. Cam quickly dialed a number, her concern evident as she held my hand. "How? But I believe you are currently on the mend, doctor. Might I request something to eat?" I am feeling as though I could consume an entire cow if you would simply remove the horns and clean its rear end. I groaned as I uttered those words, prompting laughter from those around me. However, when I attempted to join in the laughter, the pain radiating from my side nearly caused me to lose consciousness. The attending physician adjusted my pain medication dosage and demonstrated how to properly utilize the button that administered additional morphine. Before long, I found myself drifting into a sleep induced by the morphine, a state of semi-consciousness that seemed to last for a considerable duration. When Nick finally arrived, I realized that only a little over an hour had passed since I last saw him. He briefed me on the events that had transpired. I had been assaulted in my own home, and the neighborhood watch discovered my front door ajar. They subsequently contacted the police, who dispatched an ambulance. The officers located my emergency contact number for Nick in my phone, designated under the label ICE, in case of emergency. Either Nick or Cam had remained by my side throughout this ordeal. Nick proceeded to detail my injuries, which included a fractured left tibia, a shattered radius, 2 cracked ribs, a perforated lung, damage to my kidney, a cracked eye socket, and a broken nose. Beyond these considerable injuries, he lightheartedly remarked that I was otherwise in fine condition, managing to elicit a smile from me despite my circumstances. Once Nick and Cam departed to return home, a detective named Graham Cole entered the room. He inquired about my recollection of the attack, and I recounted the message from the assailant. I mentioned that I had a DNA sample on my handkerchief, which prompted him to place it in an evidence bag, clearly pleased with this development. I allowed my eyes to close momentarily, and upon reopening them, I found the room enveloped in darkness and solitude. The following day, Nick visited again and offered me the option to stay at his residence until I was capable of moving independently. I requested that he retrieve my mail from my home, which he readily agreed to do. I also inquired whether he could recommend a reputable divorce attorney, to which he nodded affirmatively, assuring me that he would follow up with information. After engaging in some additional conversation, I found myself drifting into another sleep. Upon waking, I noticed a nurse attending to my vitals. She informed me that all appeared to be in order, showing no signs of infection. Shortly thereafter, she changed my bandages and brought me a meal. Eating proved challenging, as I was limited to the use of one arm, necessitating her assistance in cutting up my food for me. I experienced a restful night's sleep and awoke feeling renewed. The nurse provided me with a bed bath, but I remained largely unresponsive due to soreness. Later, Nick arrived, accompanied by a striking woman whom he introduced as Grace Miles, my new attorney. She assured me that I still retained visitation rights with my children and agreed to accept my case. We discussed the particulars of my situation before she took her leave. Nick remained with me as I sorted through the mail he had brought from my place. Upon opening the DNA results, an initial surge of rage washed over me, soon followed by laughter. It became glaringly clear that neither of the children belonged to me. Emily had been unfaithful to both Jimmy and me, embodying the archetype of a classic cheater. After recounting the situation to Nick, I noticed his expression shift to one of paleness. Having experienced a change of heart regarding my approach, I decided it was time to negotiate a settlement. I contacted Grace and requested that she arrange a meeting with Emily, Jimmy, their attorney, and myself at the hospital. Grace successfully organized the meeting for the following day in a borrowed office. When Nick wheeled me into the room, my arm and leg encased in casts and tubes protruding from my body, I observed that Emily appeared flawless, in stark contrast to my bruised and battered appearance. Emily seemed taken aback by my state, while Jimmy merely regarded me with a smirk. I initiated the conversation by stating that I had reconsidered my previous position after some of their associates had paid me a visit. I instructed Jimmy not to deny his involvement, pointing out that the last words from one of his thugs were an instruction for me to sign the papers. I asked rhetorically who else would encourage me to sign over custody of the children without the enticing $2 million incentive. I then handed over the newly drafted paperwork that my attorney had prepared. I explained that their original proposal had given the impression I was effectively selling my children, and my lawyer clarified that such an interpretation could expose me to human trafficking charges. Their attorney perused the document with skepticism while I continued, stating that my lawyer and I had developed a new settlement agreement. Grace presented the paperwork to their attorney, including copies for both Emily and Jimmy. Their attorney interrupted, claiming that our offer differed significantly from theirs. I proceeded to outline the details. I would retain possession of my house, all its contents, my savings, my business, both cars, and my wife's jewelry. Additionally, she would be required to deposit $188,000 from her not-so-secret marital credit account into my attorney's trust account. She initiated the transfer of $188,000 from her discreet yet impactful Mertile credit account into my attorney's holding account. The words escaped her lips in a rush, accompanied by a heightened tone of indignation. "You prick, that's my money, you can't have it." Emily exclaimed, her face flushed an intense crimson. The veins in her neck throbbed visibly, highlighting her distress. Jimmy's expression shifted to one of surprise, revealing his apparent lack of knowledge regarding her concealed account. He gently guided her back into her seat, a smirk etched across his face, seemingly amused by the unfolding drama. At that moment, it became evident that a significant fracture was being etched into the foundation of their relationship. If not for his deep concern for the children, he might have chosen to leave that very instant. "Sit down and shut up, you cheating liar. The adults are talking," he snapped, his words slicing through the tension. Emily fell silent, her face transitioning from an angry red to a ghostly pale, effectively signaling her defeat. As I was saying before I was rudely interrupted, I continued, maintaining a steadfast demeanor. "Given that she earns significantly more than I do, she will also be responsible for providing me with $2,500 per month in spousal support, which will be deposited directly into my attorney's account. In addition, as a means of compensation for the emotional turmoil inflicted upon me, as well as for the irreparable damage to my marriage, I am demanding $10 million, net of taxes, to be deposited into my attorney's account by 5 p.m. this coming Friday. This amount will also cover all medical expenses, legal fees, and aftercare costs." Jimmy's reaction was nothing short of incredulous. He erupted into a fit of laughter, unable to contain himself. "Are you insane? Why should we pay you everything we have? We're only here for 20%, he declared defiantly. I acknowledged his challenge calmly. "Excuse me, did you say 20%? "Yes, 20%, he barked, his confidence wavering. "I heard you loud and clear, but do you understand what that figure actually implies?" I pressed on with a composed demeanor. "Is this some arbitrary number you conjured up to support your misguided notion?" "No," he retorted, "I just want to know how you arrived at that ridiculous figure." I maintained my poise. "I conducted thorough research on your company, its clients, and its revenue streams. Given that your company is publicly traded, that information is entirely accessible online. Thus, my calculations hold legitimacy." I continued, "Now consider the potential repercussions of this situation on your father's congressional campaign, which is built upon a narrative of family values. You must also weigh your clientele, numerous high-profile entertainment and political figures. One whiff of scandal, and they will undoubtedly sever ties with you." I elaborated, "Next, let's examine the advertising branch you represent. Your clients include several children's clothing stores, a baby product company, and a sports goods manufacturer. Any reputable brand would disassociate themselves from you in an instant, leaving you to be the scapegoat during a board meeting when all chaos eventually breaks loose. Thus, I concluded, it becomes clear that the demand for $10 million is, in fact, quite reasonable." At this juncture, Jimmy's bravado began to wither. His previous arrogance had dissipated, replaced by an expression of unease. "My attorney will send the full amount. It should be in her account by Friday at 5 p.m., I stated with certainty. The atmosphere fell into a heavy silence, and I could sense Jimmy's thought process as he contemplated his escape route. I added, "Oh, and Jimmy, should you believe that my sudden disappearance would absolve you of any responsibility, I have already forwarded the entire narrative to 5 out-of-state attorneys. If anything were to happen to me, they will immediately notify the media." His expression of defeat affirmed that I had struck a nerve. As we exited the premises, I called back over my shoulder, 5 p.m. on Friday. Later, in the solitude of my room, Grace inquired about my decision to concede and allow Jimmy to adopt my children. She glanced at the DNA test results I had presented and laughed. "You clever prick, the kids aren't yours." I replied thoughtfully, "I'm not entirely sure yet. The results do imply infidelity on Emily's part, involving both Jimmy and myself. I intend to uncover the truth and ensure that Jimmy becomes aware of it." "I would hate to find myself on your bad side. You would have been an exceptional attorney," she remarked, her admiration evident. "Thank you, but I lack the instinct for elimination that you possess," I responded. "You simply haven't tapped into it yet," she countered playfully. Later, a physician visited, informing me that I could return home the following day provided I had assistance. I opted to stay with Nick and Cam for a while, making regular hospital visits to change my dressings and monitor the recovery of my kidneys. As the clock neared 5 p.m. on Friday, I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. However, my attorney called at 3:30, relaying the news that the funds had successfully been deposited into the account. The figure was staggering, $10, $861, $312. Astounded by the sum, I was met with euphoria. I had finally achieved financial security. Grace, having handled her share, promptly transferred the remainder into my checking account. Life, albeit transformed, continued. After 8 weeks of diligent care from friends, I returned home. Subsequently, I took Nick and Cam out for an exquisite dinner as a gesture of appreciation for their unwavering support during a challenging time in my life. To express my gratitude, I presented them with a check for $500,000, intending it as a token for the assistance they had provided me. Initially, they were taken aback and sought to refuse the generous offer, but I firmly insisted, clarifying that the funds were not personally mine but rather compensation from Jimmy's employer, which added a layer of legitimacy to my decision. After some deliberation over a glass of wine, they eventually accepted the check, and it was clear that this gesture meant a great deal to both of them. As we settled into our conversation, I shared my plans of relocating to New York City to be closer to my sister. In response, Nick inquired about the fate of my house, and I mentioned that my intention was likely to rent it out. Upon hearing this, he hesitated, prompting me to encourage him to voice his thoughts. He proceeded to mention his son, Eric, who had recently graduated with a degree in engineering and was preparing for marriage. Nick expressed a desire for Eric to have a suitable place to live, and I readily agreed to rent the house to them. I instructed Nick to determine the rent based on what they could afford, emphasizing that they might utilize the income for a college fund for their impending child. Cam's embrace was so heartfelt that I momentarily feared for my ribs, a testament to her emotional gratitude. The following day, I received a heartfelt call from Nick, during which he expressed his emotions, and I felt compelled to reach out to Patty to inform her of my impending move to stay with her temporarily until I discovered a permanent residence. Patty's reaction was one of delight, and she enthusiastically began planning various activities to occupy our time together. 3 weeks later, with a mixture of nostalgia and sorrow, I closed the door to my home for the last time. A few tears escaped as I handed the keys to Nick, ensuring that he was aware I was also leaving the car title for Emily's vehicle, which I intended as a housewarming gift for his son. We embraced, exchanging promises to keep in touch, creating a bittersweet moment marking the end of one chapter in my life. After embarking on a leisurely road trip that spanned 2 days, I finally arrived at Patty's home. Our reunion was marked by an enthusiastic hug so fervent that it left me gasping for breath. Patty had orchestrated a dinner outing with a mutual friend, instructing me to don slacks and a shirt for the occasion. Upon arriving at our destination, I was taken aback to find Emily's sister, Amy, waiting for us. We settled at a casual diner with a bar, and I quickly realized I had been unwittingly set up for an introduction. While I felt a twinge of annoyance initially, I found it difficult to maintain my frustration toward Patty for long, conceding to the unfolding events. As we reached the table, Amy warmly embraced Patty, and much to my surprise, she extended a hug to me as well. She expressed her disdain for Emily, wishing her ill. Amy worked in accounting at a nearby advertising firm, and as the evening progressed, I found myself enjoying the burgeoning camaraderie. Amy was the first to invite me onto the dance floor, and we swayed to a couple of waltzes, moving harmoniously to the slow melodies. Returning to the table, Patty couldn't help but comment that we appeared to be a perfect couple, leading to a blush from Amy and prompting my hasty retreat to the restroom. The remainder of the evening was filled with dancing, as I engaged with both Amy and Patty while skillfully avoiding any slow songs. When the night came to an end, we arranged for a cab to take Amy home, after which we called for our own. Patty, in high spirits, found humor in the situation and went to bed, dismissing my protests regarding her matchmaking efforts. The following day, with renewed vigor, we embarked on a house hunting expedition. I had a preference for a house rather than an apartment, envisioning a space conducive to barbecues and gatherings with friends. Despite the exorbitant prices associated with being in proximity to New York City, I made the decision to purchase a home outright with cash. After an extensive search lasting several weeks, I finally discovered a charming 3-bedroom house that offered separate living, kitchen, and dining areas, accompanied by a decent-sized yard and a secure community entrance with 24/7 security. Patty was thrilled with the find and even jokingly suggested she might consider moving in with me. Subsequently, it became apparent that I needed to furnish the house, which included acquiring essential items such as towels, pots, and pans. The kitchen appliances were already in place, yet I still needed to stock the pantry with food and other necessities. Both Amy and Patty proved to be invaluable allies in this endeavor, helping to create a warm and inviting atmosphere rather than a mere bachelor pad. I dedicated one area to function as my workspace, equipping it with a custom motherboard, a top-of-the-line computer, and a fire-resistant safe for my valuables. Patty and Amy insisted on hosting a housewarming party and invited their friends, recognizing that my social circle in the area was virtually non-existent. Their plan was effective. In the ensuing 3 weeks, my weekends became filled with an array of parties and barbecues, and I found myself scarcely reflecting on Emily as I immersed myself in this new social life. Throughout this period, my bond with Amy deepened, transforming from mere friendship into something more complex, yet not quite romantic. One evening, Patty and Amy had planned to attend a theater performance, but Patty had to cancel unexpectedly, leaving just Amy and me to enjoy the show together. During a performance of I initiated the conversation, taking the first step that would mark the beginning of an unforgettable evening. It turned out to be the best night of my life. As the excitement of the moment lingered, I expressed my desire to reciprocate the affection and warmth that had been shared. In response, she questioned, "What did you do to me?" Her voice reflected a mixture of wonder and disbelief as she confessed, "I've never felt this way before." The day after our significant night, we awoke around 1 p.m., our stomachs reminding us of the need for nourishment. We opted to visit a charming neighborhood deli for lunch, where we engaged in light-hearted conversation that smoothly transitioned from playful banter to deeper topics. Upon returning to Amy's residence, we began to unpack the events that had unfolded the previous evening. During our conversation, she revealed a long-held secret: she had harbored feelings for me since our initial meeting. Following my split with my ex-wife, Emily, Amy had sought the assistance of her sister, Patty, to help facilitate our connection. I admitted my own interest in her but disclosed my concerns about pursuing a relationship with her, given her familial ties to my ex-wife. Amy acknowledged my thoughtful consideration but candidly stated that she could no longer wait patiently for something to happen. In an amusing twist, she shared that she and Patty had conspired the night before to bring us together. With a laugh, she sent a message to Patty proclaiming, "Mission accomplished." After our fruitful discussion, Amy offered to drive me home so I could change clothes. Amy's demeanor contrasted sharply with that of her sister. Unlike Patty, who often engaged in petty disputes, Amy exuded a sense of calm and reassurance that allowed me to feel at ease. Patty noticed our burgeoning relationship and frequently commented on how delighted she was for us, remarking on how perfectly we seemed to complement each other. During this period of personal development, I was also focused on a significant professional project that I had been diligently working on. I finally completed the intricate design, which showcased the remarkable versatility of the software and hardware I had developed. These innovations held the potential to be adapted for various applications, including military operations, gaming, aviation, and automotive uses. Recognizing the importance of rigorous testing, particularly by skilled gamers, I decided to reach out to a leading game development company to present my work. Initially, the gaming company exhibited skepticism. They believed they were already equipped with the finest programming talent in the industry. After extensive negotiations, however, they agreed to evaluate my product through a 3-month trial period. I provided them with sealed units complete with tamper-proof software to ensure the integrity of the testing process. Upon completion of the trial, we convened for a meeting to discuss the results. I brought my sister along, who was a corporate attorney, along with one of her colleagues who had experience in high-stakes negotiations. Given the potential value of my patents, particularly in the context of global sales, the company proposed a buyout offer of $120 million. However, I countered with a request for licensing rights spanning 10 years instead. My aim was to secure a deal that would yield $50 million outright, alongside a 1% royalty on all applications utilizing my hardware and software for the same duration. After several hours of back-and-forth discussions, we ultimately reached a compromise, a settlement of $65 million and a 5% royalty for a decade. Upon signing the contracts and sealing the agreement with a handshake, I found myself in a position of considerable financial wealth. Even after accounting for taxes, similar negotiations ensued with the military's aeronautical department, a prominent aircraft supplier, and a significant automobile manufacturer. When the dust settled, my post-tax cash assets were valued at over $250 million, with a 10-year potential exceeding $3.5 billion. Faced with such newfound wealth, I sought investment advice, fully aware that even modest interest could generate over $12 million annually before taxes. As my personal life developed, I noted that my sister was renting an apartment and dating another attorney, while Amy and I had decided to move in together, signifying a serious commitment in our relationship. A year passed since I had embarked on this new chapter of my life, and I began to contemplate some form of retribution against those who had caused me pain in the past. With a sense of determination, I sat down with Amy and broached the subject, stating, "I still want to get back at your sister. Are you okay with that?" To my relief, she responded affirmatively, saying, "Burn the witch. I'll help if you need it." We brainstormed various strategies but concluded that it would be prudent to wait before taking any concrete actions. Later that evening, my phone rang, and I was surprised to hear from an assistant district attorney in Freestone, Texas. The official inquired if I would be willing to testify in 3 weeks regarding the individuals who had attacked me. I agreed, and Amy insisted on accompanying me for support. We quickly made travel arrangements and arrived in Texas a week prior to the trial. Upon our arrival, Nick picked us up and took us to our motel. As a token of appreciation for his assistance, we invited Nick and his companion, Cam, to dinner at the Regency Club. The evening was imbued with a sense of celebration, as the women looked stunning in elegant cocktail dresses, while I donned an expensive $2,000 Italian suit, and Nick displayed his best attire. None of us had ever dined at this restaurant before, making the occasion feel particularly special. As we entered, a uniformed doorman opened car doors for us and, subsequently, the restaurant door. The head waiter escorted us to our table, where Cam and Nick admired the talented pianist playing soft melodies in the background. We began our meal with an appetizer of. Amy excused herself to visit the powder room, and Cam followed closely behind her. As they navigated their way through the restaurant, they had to pass by Emily's table. I observed the moment when Emily seemed to freeze in her seat, her hand instinctively covering her mouth in disbelief at the sight of Amy. With a warm greeting, Amy pointed in my direction and exchanged a few words with Cam that elicited laughter from him. In a sudden burst of urgency, Emily rose from her seat and hurried out of the restaurant, with Jimmy accompanying her. Upon Amy's and Cam's return, I inquired about the content of Amy's conversation with Emily. Amy recounted the exchange, detailing how, after Cam had greeted Emily, she posed a question regarding my identity. I responded with a tongue-in-cheek remark, stating, "I'm with another millionaire sitting over there, thanks for divorcing him. We were meant to be together. You obviously traded down." I further added, "I don't see what you ever saw in that stuffed monkey," before walking away. The memory of that encounter sparked laughter between Amy and me as we danced and reminisced late into the night. The following day, while Nick and Cam engaged in their work, Amy and I took the opportunity to explore the city as tourists. Our adventures included a visit to a shooting range, where to my surprise, Amy displayed exceptional marksmanship skills. As the days progressed, we prepared for the upcoming trial, and on the eve of the trial, we enjoyed a delightful dinner at Nick and Cam's home. The comfort of home-cooked food was a welcome change from the fare often served at restaurants. During dinner, we raised our glasses to toast their forthcoming wedding, and Nick shared exciting news about his son's impending marriage scheduled for the spring. When we met with the assistant district attorney, he confidently labeled the case a slam dunk. My assistance in providing the DNA of the group's leader had been instrumental in identifying him. He was ready to testify against his accomplices, which gave us a sense of hope. The trial concluded with the leader receiving a substantial sentence of 15 years in exchange for his cooperation in testifying against his accomplices. The individual I had struck in self-defense was sentenced to 2 years, as he had not actively participated in the attack, while another accomplice received a 5-year sentence for his first offense. After Nick and Cam graciously dropped us off at the airport, I discreetly handed Nick an envelope, instructing him not to open it until we were airborne. Inside the envelope were the deeds to my former residence, presented as a wedding gift for his son. I had previously shown this gesture to his son alone, understanding the significance of wedding vows and the commitment they entail. Once settled back at home, I reached out to my sister, inviting her and her partner to dinner on Friday, all while keeping Amy blissfully unaware of my plans. When Friday arrived, I finally revealed the dinner arrangements to Amy, and her excitement was palpable. That evening, we arrived at a restaurant in a luxurious limousine, a reservation I had secured 3 weeks prior. Following a satisfying meal, an entertainer dressed in a gypsy costume approached our table, enchanting us with a love ballad on his violin. To Amy's astonishment, he then got down on one knee and proposed to her. Overcome with emotion and amid the applause of fellow diners, she accepted. The joy in her expression was truly priceless. My sister came over to embrace Amy, warmly welcoming her into the family. As the evening progressed, we danced joyfully, celebrating the engagement before the limousine took us back home. Our wedding was scheduled for early spring, and invitations were promptly sent out. I chose to step back from the planning phase, allowing Amy and my sister to take charge of the details. The ceremony took place at a nearby church, and I arranged accommodations for all out-of-town guests, reserving an entire floor at the Hilton for their 3-day stay. The wedding itself was a grand affair, characterized by laughter and happiness, with Nick and Cam expressing that they had not experienced such fun in years. They also invited us to their son's wedding, planned for 2 months later, which promised a series of daily excursions and evening dances. Following our nuptials, Amy and I embarked on a 2-week sailing trip in the Caribbean, a much-needed escapade after our wedding festivities, although we returned feeling quite drained. By then, I had assembled a troubleshooting team capable of addressing any issues related to my program and hardware, allowing me to take a more measured approach to planning my future endeavors. 9 months later, our son James was born, followed by the arrival of his sister Sarah a year after. We relocated to a larger residence while remaining within our secure community. At this stage, my financial success had escalated considerably, and I had gained a degree of recognition within society, frequently attending charitable events. Some society magazines began to refer to Amy and me as the ideal couple. However, despite these joyful developments, I could not fully relinquish my yearning for revenge. The anguish of past events lingered in my mind over the course of the following 5 years. I employed a private investigator to collect information on Emily, Jimmy, and their connections, including Emily's former employer, Troy Simmons. As the investigation unfolded, my suspicions regarding Troy's paternity of Emily's twins were confirmed. Furthermore, it became apparent that Emily continued her relationship with Troy alongside 2 other men. Emily continued her entanglement with Troy and 2 other men while Jimmy was consumed with his father's business affairs and a rotation of escorts. It was during this time that I initiated the first phase of my strategic plan, a decisive step that revolved around a significant revelation. I sent Jimmy the DNA results of the twins, along with the confirmation of Troy's paternity, accompanied by a note that simply stated, "Do the math." This revelation served a dual purpose. It not only confirmed that the twins were not his biological children, but also exposed Emily's ongoing infidelities. In addition to the DNA results, I included documentation of her current affairs, effectively providing concrete evidence of her betrayal. With the information sent, I stepped back, allowing the ensuing chaos to unfold as I anticipated. Approximately 2 months later, I received a call from Nick, who informed me that Jimmy had taken drastic action by kicking Emily out of their home. Utilizing the prenup, he managed to retain custody of the children he had adopted, leaving Emily in a precarious situation, stripped of all possessions and devoid of a support system. Her whereabouts became unknown, further complicating her situation. In an effort to gather information concerning Emily's condition, Amy reached out to Emily's parents. However, the response was stark. Her father conveyed a firm message, instructing her not to make any further attempts to contact them. He revealed that he had only sent her a meager couple of $1,000. Emily now faced the harsh reality of betrayal and the consequences of her actions. With the first phase of my plan complete, I found that her email account remained operational. Taking advantage of this, I forwarded her a private investigator's report on Jimmy, which included photographs of him with various women. I believed this would exacerbate her situation and provoke a reaction. A few days later, while Amy and I were engrossed in an old film, the intercom sounded, announcing that Emily wished to visit. I inquired with Amy if we should grant her entry, to which she responded with a nonchalant shrug, suggesting we should hear what Emily had to say. I instructed the security guard to allow her in. Shortly afterward, a knock at the door interrupted our evening. Upon opening it, Amy revealed a visibly disheveled Emily, whose hair appeared unkempt, tie wrinkled, and face devoid of makeup. As she stepped inside, it was evident that she was avoiding eye contact with me. Amy offered her a cup of coffee, which she gratefully accepted before taking a seat. Despite feeling a pang of pity for her plight, I was acutely aware of the pain she had inflicted in the past. Observing her condition, I commented, "You look like a wreck. What happened to you?" This seemingly simple question prompted an emotional breakdown from Emily, rendering her momentarily speechless. After a lengthy pause filled with tears, she recounted her series of misfortunes. He found out about Troy eventually. He realized the twins weren't his biological children. Then, after we were married, he discovered that I was still seeing Troy. He completely lost control and threw me out, leaving me in the clothes I was wearing. With only her laptop and a few $1,000s remaining in her account, she had quickly checked into a motel. Her isolation deepened as she lamented that no one was willing to speak to her following her betrayal. Her family had disowned her, a stark reminder of her choices. Looking up at me with red and puffy eyes, she admitted, "I called his father, Barry, hoping for support, but he informed me that I was no longer needed since he had secured an heir to the family fortune. My father finally consented to have a conversation with me, wiring a small sum before brusquely instructing me never to contact him again." Turning to Amy, she added, "I have nowhere else to turn, so I came here, hoping you might show me some pity. I know you wouldn't help me if I were in dire straits. I'm sorry for everything. I was cruel and selfish, and I deserve what I'm going through, but I miss my children. While I was a terrible wife, I was a good mother." Her voice trailed off as she expressed her defeat, momentarily abandoning the rehearsed speech that I could discern she had practiced. Although I recognized the truth in much of what she claimed, my desire to confront Jimmy lingered. His actions had caused me pain, and I was determined that his reckoning was imminent. Emily mentioned that she had not eaten in 2 days. Upon hearing this, Amy asked if she was hungry, to which Emily nodded in affirmation. Amy proceeded to prepare a meal consisting of bacon, eggs, hash browns, and pancakes. As Emily indulged in the food, she requested additional coffee, which Amy promptly served. The nourishment seemed to revitalize her somewhat. Afterward, Amy escorted her to the guest bedroom, leaving some clean clothes on the bed for her use. While Emily showered, Amy and I discussed our next steps. Despite my lingering resentment toward her, I acknowledged that she was still my sister and, thus, warranted some form of assistance. Amy concurred, admitting that helping her might serve to irk Jimmy, particularly by showcasing her recovery. For the time being, we decided to allow Emily to stay in the guest room until we could devise alternative arrangements. I can take her shopping for essentials tomorrow, Amy suggested. Once Emily returned downstairs, looking considerably more refreshed, we informed her of our plans for the upcoming days. Overcome with emotion, she began to cry once more. Later that night, we all retired to our respective rooms. The following morning, Emily took the initiative to prepare breakfast, brewing coffee and toasting buttered bread. As I joined Amy at the table, Emily expressed her aston. A sense of unexpected fortune enveloped me as I reflected on the kindness extended to me by Emily. She had expressed her feelings of loss, claiming, "You took my family from me." In response, I acknowledged the weight of her words, confirming that her actions in the past were indeed unforgivable. Yet, with the love I held for Amy, I found within myself the capacity to forgive. I resolved to move forward, determined that this chapter of hurt and regret would conclude without further apologies or lingering grievances. I informed Emily of the day's agenda, mentioning that she would accompany me on a shopping trip to Walmart. She nodded in agreement, albeit with a hint of trepidation. Later that day, I began searching for housing solutions for Emily. To my relief, I discovered a one-bedroom house conveniently located just 2 streets away from my own residence. This property was move-in ready, fully equipped with the necessary amenities, and the owner was stationed overseas for the next 3 years. After a thorough inspection of the house, I decided to pay a year's worth of rent upfront along with a security deposit to ensure that Emily would have a stable and comfortable living situation. When the girls returned from their shopping excursion, I eagerly shared the news of the new house with Emily. Overwhelmed with gratitude, she embraced me tightly, tears of joy streaming down her face. Amy, witnessing the moment, grinned widely and blew a kiss toward Emily. In a quiet moment, Emily turned to me and confided, "I don't know what I was thinking when I messed up our marriage. I should never have let you go." She then encouraged Amy, saying, "Take good care of him. He's the best man you'll ever find." With that, she quickly retreated upstairs, clearly striving to hide her emotions. Alone with Amy, I detailed my plans to assist Emily while simultaneously strategizing how to counteract the actions of Jimmy and his father. We loaded Amy's van with supplies and furnishings, arranging for the remaining items to be delivered the following day. While Emily was out shopping for essentials, the girls managed to find a place for every item in the new home, creating a sense of order and warmth that felt almost magical. In our effort to support Emily, we decided to extend financial assistance by providing her with a credit card that had a limit of $1,000 per month, as well as $10,000 for her checking account. The exchange of hugs and tears confirmed the bond we were nurturing during this pivotal time. That evening, as Amy and I lay in bed, she voiced her appreciation, saying, "I'm glad you didn't kick Emily when she was down." I responded with the hope that Emily had learned a valuable lesson and would treat her future partner with greater respect. The following day, we dedicated our efforts to helping Emily settle into her new residence. Despite her insistence on handling much of the work herself, she extended an invitation for us to join her for dinner that night. Leaving the children with a sitter, we arrived at Emily's home to find a beautifully prepared meal awaiting us. She had made roast beef accompanied by perfectly baked potatoes and mixed vegetables drizzled with garlic butter. For dessert, she presented baked apples stuffed with raisins and topped with a scoop of ice cream. We left her house feeling completely satisfied and content. As Emily adjusted to her new life, Amy and I made the decision to assist her with her divorce proceedings. I arranged a meeting with an attorney based on Patty's recommendation, and we met with Brian Scott. Despite his reservations about Emily's past choices, he agreed to take on her case, understanding the importance of our primary goal, reclaiming her children. Financial matters were secondary to the welfare of the children. During our meeting, I shared a critical realization: I had previously allowed Jimmy to adopt the kids. When Brian informed us that this would present a significant challenge, I proposed a potential solution. If the children were not biologically mine, the adoption could be contested. I explained that I had received a $2 million settlement regarding the children, but had refused to allow Jimmy to adopt them without a financial incentive. I was contemplating seeking $10 million for alienation of affection against both Jimmy and XYZ Advertising. I disclosed that I had signed a non-disclosure agreement with XYZ to prevent their involvement in the divorce proceedings, emphasizing that violating this agreement would require repayment of the settlement funds. Additionally, I provided Brian with DNA reports confirming that Troy Simmons was the biological father of the children, thus proving that they were not my biological offspring. This crucial evidence indicated that Jimmy had no legitimate claim to the adoption, allowing Emily the opportunity to reclaim her children. I clarified that this endeavor extended beyond Emily's needs. It was also a strategic move to disrupt Jimmy and his father's plans. Brian nodded in understanding, assuring me that he would handle the matter and keep us informed of any developments. Later that evening, I explained my actions to Amy, who expressed her full support and agreement with my plan. We then invited Emily over to share the details with her. Initially appearing anxious, Emily quickly relaxed as I conveyed the strategy we had devised. Grateful for our assistance, she embraced me once more, only to shy away, embarrassed and apologizing for her emotional display. In unison, Amy and I reassured her, saying, "Don't worry about it. Let's leave it at that." A few days later, Brian contacted us to schedule a meeting with both Emily and myself. He informed us that he would now be representing Emily instead of me, a transition we were all comfortable with. During this meeting, Brian outlined his strategy. He stated that our first step would be to file a motion to annul the adoption. After pausing to gauge our reactions, he continued by revealing that he would report to the state the attempt by Jimmy Prescott and his father, Barry, to purchase children. Mr. Dan Colton was coerced into permitting the adoption of children who, in reality, were not biologically his, thereby rendering the adoption legally void. He presented DNA test results as evidence to substantiate his claims. In light of these revelations, Emily plans to demand the immediate return of her children, who are currently at the residence located at 218 Fifth Street. Additionally, she intends to pursue legal action against Mr. Troy Simmons for sexual maltreatment, alleging that he compelled her, at the time Mrs. Colton, into an extramarital affair under the threat of losing her employment. Moreover, Emily plans to take legal action against Mr. Jimmy Prescott for his role in coercing her into a relationship that ultimately caused the dissolution of her marriage. Mr. Prescott's actions were manipulative and intentional, leading to significant emotional distress. Emily's legal strategy will also include filing a lawsuit against XYZ Advertising for facilitating the maltreatment and actively promoting the affair between Mr. Prescott and herself. It is critical to note that both Mr. Jimmy Prescott, the CEO, and Mr. Barry Prescott, the chairman, were fully aware of the affair and condoned it, which contributed to the breakdown of her marriage. Further legal ramifications will be pursued, including charges against Mr. Troy Simmons for alienation of affection, signifying his contribution to the end of Emily's marriage. Mr. Jimmy Prescott will also face similar charges under the same premise. Emily's grievances will extend to XYZ Advertising for neglecting to incorporate a morality clause in their employment contracts, despite their awareness of the affair. The company will also be held accountable for enabling the affair between Mrs. Colton and Mr. Prescott, which played a pivotal role in the dissolution of her marriage. Brian, a key figure in this legal endeavor, noted that Mr. Colton acknowledges having signed a non-disclosure agreement, NDA, for the amount of $10 million, but is prepared to repay this sum should he breach the agreement. The gravity of Brian's comprehensive legal strategy left those present in a state of shock. Despite her emotional turmoil, Emily appeared resolute in her decisions. She expressed her willingness to manage the consequences of her actions, asserting that she bore responsibility for the situation. I urged Brian to initiate proceedings immediately, emphasizing the need to launch a media campaign targeting Troy Simmons, Jimmy Prescott, Barry Prescott, and XYZ Advertising. Brian consented to be ready within 2 weeks, with plans for me to initiate an offensive a week later. Upon departing from Brian's office, a sense of justice felt palpable, despite the anticipated legal challenges posed by Jimmy and Barry. True to the plan, a week later, I disseminated all gathered evidence to various media outlets, resulting in an overwhelming response. The media descended upon the courthouse and the residences of those implicated, capturing the public's attention. In the aftermath, clients of XYZ Advertising began to threaten severance of their relationships with the company. The board responded decisively by terminating Troy Simmons without severance pay. To mitigate damage, both Jimmy and Barry Prescott resigned from their positions. Consequently, XYZ Advertising agreed to a 7-figure settlement with Emily, which, when combined with my own financial recompense, positioned me to manage the repayment of the $10 million NDA. The repercussions continued to unfold. Congressman Barry Prescott, known for his campaign centered around family values, resigned shortly thereafter, citing health issues. In the following weeks, the FBI uncovered financial anomalies, including payments to escort services and misappropriation of campaign funds. This led to his appearance before a select committee within a month. Emily successfully regained custody of her children, and soon after, Amy and I assisted her in driving the children to her parents' home for a reconciliation. I expressed my willingness to forgive Emily, highlighting that while we may not have been the closest of friends, a civil rapport was achievable. Witnessing their grandchildren for the first time facilitated a smoother resolution among family members. In the aftermath of these events, Barry Prescott received a 3-year prison sentence for the misuse of campaign funds, while Jimmy Prescott was convicted of attempted human trafficking and embezzlement, resulting in a 5-year sentence, a consequence of his refusal to disclose the whereabouts of some missing funds. In a calculated move for final vindication, I arranged for Jimmy to be placed in proximity with a particularly dangerous inmate while incarcerated. Meanwhile, Emily transitioned to a larger residence, successfully retook her bar exams, and commenced employment at the same law firm as Patty. While our social interactions remained limited, we occasionally provided childcare assistance for one another. Since these events, Emily has chosen to focus on her career and her children, refraining from entering into new romantic relationships.